Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can spend some time talking about how to conquer your fears.
Mm-hmm. So really, there's only one fear, and that's the fear of death.
Hmm.
Every fear is just a flavor of that.
Right.
So there's no point like talking about this fear of this, the fear of heights, the fear of public speaking, the fear of um, I don't know, being vulnerable, the fear of being lonely, like all of these fears really are just flavors of the fear of death. And what meditation helps with is becoming more and more familiar with that fear. Because in a way, you could look at it from this perspective as meditation is death. But the mind has an it has a projection of what death is, and the actuality of it is completely different. What the mind calls death is actually your true self. The mind sees freedom as death. The mind sees love as death. That's why the mind's not interested in happiness. It's not interested in peace. It's not interested in love. It's not interested in freedom. The separate self, if we believe to be separate, is the opposite of happiness, love, peace, and freedom. It wants nothing to do with that. It says it wants it, but it's afraid of it. Like the separate self will say, I want to experience love. But the separate self can't experience love because love is the absence of separation. So to believe that you're separate is in direct opposition to what love actually is. To believe that you're separate is a limitation, and freedom is the absence of limitations. It's to be limitless, not limited. The separate self really is, it's an activity, it's not an entity. And this activity is resistance to this moment. So another word for resistance is it's fighting. It's a fighting activity to this moment. And to surrender is to stop fighting. So the separate self is conflict. It's always in conflict with what is, which is this moment. So it survives as conflict. So it has no interest in peace because peace would be it's the absence of conflict. And the separate self is really the activity of suffering. And happiness is the absence of suffering. So it says it wants happiness, but it doesn't really want happiness. because happiness is the end of suffering. So in meditation, there's the experience of happiness, there's the experience of love, there's the experience of peace, there's the experience of freedom. And what I always point out is, well, look who doesn't show up in that meditation. There's no separate self. There's no who you think you are in the meditation. There might be the thought that there's a meditator that shows up to the meeting. There's a meditator that shows up to the meditation. There's a meditator that starts in the meditation. But very quickly in these meditations, which hopefully they're becoming more obvious now, is that this meditator is actually melting in the meditation. That who you think you are is dissolving in the meditation. That's what's dissolving, these like self-referential thoughts. I am meditating now. Oh, I'm a little hungry. I'm a little uncomfortable. What am I going to do tomorrow? All of these thoughts, they're always referencing this I, the I that I believe to be, the me that I believe to be. So these thoughts that are always referencing this me that I believe to be, these thoughts are really a story about me. That even showing up to the meditation, there's a story about me meditating. There's a story about me meditating, and the meditation continues. But what you're noticing in each of these meditations is those thoughts, that story is less and less. In each of these meditations, there's less of that story. So that story is, it's slowing down. There's less and less of the story. And then I show you that, well, who you think you are really is a story. There's no who you think you are that's apart from a story. I have this type of family. I grew up here. I have this education. This is my job. This is my significant other. These are my kids. These are my plans. All of this is a story. All of this is thoughts. So in the meditation, you're seeing that actually there's less and less of these thoughts, less and less of this identification. At first, it starts off as very strong identification and a lot of thoughts that make it feel like this story has some sort of solidity to it. But then you start noticing that actually, well, this story is now less solid. There's a lot more gaps in it because the activity, the storytelling activity, is slowing down. It's as if I'm reading a story to you, and if I'm reading it very fluidly, there's no doubt that it's a story. But if I'm only reading one word every 5 seconds, it's kind of hard to tell that I'm telling you a story. because of that spacing out. So just like that, the thoughts are more spaced out. There's more gap, more space between one thought and another thought. So it's losing that structure of that story. It's losing that solidity to the story. It's less of there's a story and it's more of, well, there's just some thoughts that are appearing and disappearing. Now, the separate self really is fear. And the fear of death is just the fear of this activity, the fear of the storytelling activity coming to an end. But in each of these meditations, it's becoming more and more clear that when this activity slows down, you, what you essentially are, is unaffected by it. It's you that's noticing the thought slowing down, the story slowing down, this activity of mind slowing down. It's you that's noticing this narration quiet, the mind chatter quiet, the monologue of the mind. It's you that's noticing that quiet. It's you that's noticing it slowing down. So all fear is really the fear of that activity coming to an end. Now, who you think you are is an activity. The person isn't really like a separate entity. It's more of a personing. It's an activity. The separate self isn't really an entity. It's like a selfing. It's an activity. So meditation it's like a slow death. Now that sounds painful just because of our ideas of what a slow death would be, but you see that it's actually not the case. The reality, right? The idea of a slow death, that's like, ooh, that sounds like torturous. I've seen that in movies. I do not want that. But this meditation of this slowing down of the activity, the quieting down of the activity, it's winding down. And paradoxically, that's all you ever want. That's what you actually long for. Now, when this activity goes silent and still, meaning when it comes to rest, and it's you that is aware that the activity is no more. It's you that's aware that who you think you are is no more. It's you that's aware that who you think you are has come to an end. That's what I mean by what meditation is death. Because you are witnessing the end of who you think you are. What you truly are is unborn and cannot die. What you truly are is eternal. It's without start, it's without end. That which starts and ends is an activity. That's the personing activity. And that is 100% conceptual. It's just thought activity. Concepts are made of thought. So it's just this thought activity that's coming to an end. Like I said before, is that separate self is the conflict. It is the resistance. So to just sit and just be silent, you notice that there's some sort of resistance to being still. There's some sort of resistance to being silent. So that's the resistance to coming to an end. What is it that doesn't want to come to an end? And that's that separate selfing, the activity that doesn't want to come to an end. The conflict doesn't want to come to an end. The limitation doesn't want to come to an end. The suffering doesn't want to come to an end. The separation doesn't want to come to an end. So that's fear in a nutshell. Now you see what when we're speaking about it so clearly like this, it's not scary. You are already experiencing it. There's only a mental projection that you're crossing over. You're not crossing over. I'm saying you're already, there's no line. And even if you want to imagine there's a line, I'm saying, well, using that kind of silly analogy, I'm saying you're already on the other side. You are already what you are. You're not crossing over to become what you already are. And this word death is very taboo in our culture, and it's because it's the unknown. To the mind, what you are is the unknown. Death is the unknown. But I'm saying what you truly are is unknown to the mind. The mind can never know you because that mind it's an activity. So the activity can't know rest. Because the end of the activity, well, then now there's rest. So that activity can't know rest. It's only rest that can know rest. It's rest. That's what you are. Rest. You are the rest that knows the activity. The rest can know the activity, but the activity cannot know rest. When we identify with the separate self, then there wants to be this attaining happiness and peace and love and freedom for the me, but it can't. It's not possible because who I believe to be is like it's like the antithesis to that. It's the opposite, you could say. So the separate self has this kind of thought, you could say, of it wants to experience its absence. Because in the absence of the separate self, well, there's just happiness, love, peace, and freedom. And the separate self hears that and kind of says, oh, well, like, I want to experience that, but it can't. And when we slow it down like this and see very clearly that actually in the meditation, it's as if a separate self comes to the meditation and says, this is great. it's Wednesday night and I want to do the meditation and I want to feel good. And I'm showing you that actually that separate self doesn't make it too far into the meditation. It drops off pretty quickly, depending on how, how long you've been like coming to the meditations, how, like a lot of kind of different variables, you could say. But it's like this activity kind of just drops off. It comes to an end. And then what you are experiencing is your true self. It's the true self that's experiencing the true self. It's not a false self that's experiencing a true self. It's not the limited that's experiencing the limitless. Only the infinite can experience the infinite.
Right. It's very subtle, at what point the mind